Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric Entertaining Series. Who's Nintendo suing this week and why are they suing them? But interestingly enough, this isn't actually a video where Nintendo sues anyone, but unfortunately another mainstay of the emulation community, the Homebrew Channel, has gone the way of the dodo. They've ceased all active developments, they've shut down their GitHub page, and they've said they are no longer going to be working on this application because apparently somewhere down the line someone included source code from the Nintendo SDK as well as other stolen source code if you believe the GitHub page, and that means there's definitely some avoidance here, because when we talked about Yuzu, we found that apparently the emulation developers had used contents from the SDK from Nintendo Switch, and Nintendo went after them. And if you don't know how that ended up, it ended up with them having to pay a metric fortune to Nintendo. So it seems like some of the developers of the Homebrew Channel decided to grab their ball and go home as an avoidance technique. That way Nintendo would never look at them in the first place, because if in fact they did have source code from the Nintendo SDKs in the Homebrew application and Nintendo knew about that, they could 100% sue them, just like they did Tropic Haze, developers of Yuzu. And if you don't know how that ended, it ended up in a $2.4 million judgment. That is a lot of money, and these developers probably do not want to pay that. And it is an unfortunate circumstance. We've lost another mainstay application as far as emulation is concerned, because the Wii Homebrew Channel really doesn't do anything on the piracy side of things whatsoever. It allows you to download applications for your Wii and Wii U that otherwise aren't available on the Nintendo Store. If I want to play something like Mario Kart Arcade GP, a Nintendo Triforce exclusive game that was only available in arcades, you can do that with applications you can find on the Homebrew Channel. Nintendo don't specifically. It just allows you to be able to run games that would work on the hardware, but for one reason or another basically locked out. So if you want to play Mario Kart Arcade GP or GP2 on your Wii U, you need to use something like the Homebrew Channel to be able to actually get all the applications to make that possible. And before you leave a comment down below, it doesn't mean the Homebrew Channel is going anywhere. That is true. If you have it on your Wii, you're perfectly fine. If you have it on your Wii U, you're perfectly fine, and builds of the application will be able to be found on the internet till the end of time, because we know nothing ever truly disappears from the internet, it just gets harder to find. Which honestly is just a little bit of a disappointing situation, but I understand in this one. So to go over the overall story, some of the developers are talking about the fact that they were shutting down the GitHub and basically shutting down the entire project. It was created by a group, Fail Overflow, and that's who the Homebrew Channel was made by. But apparently, again, somebody in the development process somewhere down the line took bits of the official Nintendo SDK and placed them within the Homebrew Channel application. That means they used copywritten Nintendo written code and basically put it into that actual program. And that's what was apparently found out with Yuzu as well, at least as the story goes, and that's why they probably quickly settled for $2.4 million. So think to yourself, if you're the developers in charge of that GitHub as far as the Homebrew Channel is concerned, do you want to leave that up and hope that Nintendo never finds out that apparently there is infringing code in your software, or do you want to just remove it and basically kind of fix the problem before it ever does become a problem? Because I'm sure these people don't have multiple millions of dollars sitting around. I'm sure the people that developed Yuzu didn't either, but having that code within the actual code base and having it written by Nintendo would leave them open up to a massive lawsuit. And clearly we know from not only this channel but the news in general, Nintendo is out there suing absolutely everyone they can right now, whether it's for piracy, leaking games, emulation, using bits of source code, or some ridiculous things like even writing sheet music for these games. When they talk about here, apparently another portion of the Homebrew Channel's code was also copied by RTEMS, or RTEMS, which is another GitHub repo that has a ton of code on it. Basically, when you're writing applications, unless code is open source, you just can't kind of copy and paste that or even make a few slight changes and put it into your actual program. Now, I am not very well versed on coding, I just know the basics of the law. I'm sure it does get more complex than that. And even something like Ryujinx, which didn't use any source code from the Nintendo SDK, that ended up going away as well. Now, I don't think we're ever going to know 100% the reason that Ryujinx went away, but basically the lead developer was in contact with Nintendo and agreed to cease development of that emulation platform. Does that mean they were handed a bag of cash to go away? It's possible. Does that mean Nintendo threatened them with a massive lawsuit if they didn't go away? Also possible. All we know is they walked away. So the reality is Nintendo is going to go after things even if they don't have infringing code within their actual structure. And if you find out that you think you're doing something that is permissible, but come to find out that there is code in there that does not belong to you legally, your best course of action, unfortunately, would just be to pull up the tent stakes, pack that tent up, and just get the hell out of town before any sort of problems happen. And if we go over to the actual GitHub page for the Homebrew Channel, they basically spell out a lot more of the details here. A lot of it gets technical in the way that they're talking about the source code from the SDK and what is within the Homebrew Channel's code that shouldn't be there, but it is just basically saying that apparently some people that were involved with the project at some points in time just straight up stole source code. Now, I'm sure the people that are being accused are going to say that they didn't, and I'm sure it's going to turn into some infighting. That's probably going to get a little bit messy on Twitter, online, and otherwise. It always does, but unfortunately in the end that means something like the Homebrew Channel is just going to not have any active development. While it hasn't seen an update in some time now, it is a little bit of a bummer. It seems like Emulation and the applications around it just seem to be imploding these days. We've lost every single Switch emulator. Citra is gone out there. Now the Homebrew Channel has been 86'd as well, and it's all just down to the fact that the monetary damages if you get caught and lose a case are astronomical, but something like the Homebrew Channel really does open up the Wii and Wii U, and as far as the Wii hardware is concerned, it is antiquated. Now Nintendo doesn't support it, so you should be able to do whatever you want with it, and applications like the Homebrew Channel were valuable to allow you to run different emulators on your Wiis and Wii Us, be able to play Triforce games and do other things that you were never able to do before. And outside of the fact that you should own the games before you run them on your Wii and Wii U, you purchase the hardware and you do have the right to modify it in any way you would like, so long as you're not doing something you shouldn't be doing in the end. And I know a lot of companies would absolutely love to have that precedent just basically gotten rid of, John Deere tractors weirdly being one of them, and it is something we get to do. And you'll see here the person that amended the overall text on GitHub said that you should demand that people that make these applications adhere to the laws and don't steal any code. That definitely is an admirable ask. The unfortunate part is so many of these projects are just group projects. You may have 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 contributors committing code to the actual repo so you can improve your program. So it becomes a very big issue trying to actually police everything going on. But again, as much of a bummer as this is, I 100% understand why the people in charge of the Homebrew Channel development just wouldn't want to move on anymore, because we've seen Nintendo sue Pal World for so many different patents that should have never been granted. We've seen them go after mod chips, we've seen them go after different flash carts, even the makers and sellers of the flash carts, and technically a flash cart doesn't do anything it shouldn't do off the top. It's only by what you put on it whether or not it would be infringing in some way, shape, or form. But clearly the point is Nintendo isn't pulling any punches when it comes to legal ramifications and legal recourse when they feel like they want to go after somebody. So if I was on that Wii Homebrew Channel team right now and I was thinking to myself that every single thing that Nintendo hasn't liked has been shut down and people have had to pay a lot of money in settlements, I would just run straight for the hills, say fuck it, we're done, let's move on and just do something differently. But unfortunately that means that stuff like emulation and stuff like homebrew apps do get set back. And it is one of those things that is always a bummer. Even showing Nintendo emulation on YouTube can in some way, shape, or form get you in trouble if Nintendo's paying attention and they don't particularly like what you're showing. That's why when I do any sort of emulation, I usually show the hardware in a shop before I even show it running, so I can unequivocally prove that I own the hardware, I own the software. What I'm doing is perfectly legally allowed in the United States of America. But even showing something like that MIG Flash, you could get a copyright strike from Nintendo if you do that. So that is why somebody like the Homebrew Channel just basically stopped development. It becomes too risky. If you want to write software like this, you need to do it with a clean code base, basically white room reverse engineering, or creating entirely new code bases that do what you need to do without stepping on anybody's toes. Because the rumor out there is as well that the Yuzu team had a history of stealing code and putting it into their emulator. I don't know if that's been definitively proven, so I'm just saying it as an observation, not as a statement of fact. But if you were admitting on GitHub that some of the code was in the Homebrew Channel from Nintendo, and you know that Nintendo already got a $2.4 million settlement off a maker of an emulator accused of stealing source code, you better shut it down, and you better shut it down quick. So unfortunately, that's why you see all these emulators shutting down, and that's why now the Homebrew Channel is the next victim of Nintendo, even if Nintendo never did anything in the first place. Because basically the fear of what Nintendo could do if they find something they don't like is so great that Nintendo's out there getting kill shots and trophies for the wall, even if they didn't even go out on the hunt in the first place. So unfortunately, the Homebrew Channel is the next victim of something like this. While it makes total sense that it did shut down, and I agree with the lead developers, you shouldn't do it that way, it is still a bummer of a loss. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.